Welcome to the Self Revolution podcast. This is your weekly reminder to wake up to who the fuck you really are. I'm your host, Breanna Rae Blaney, and it is truly my honor to guide you on this journey of self-revolution and evolution. Join me as one by one, we collectively wake up to create a more harmonious, enlightened, and fulfilled world. Welcome back to the Self Revolution podcast. I am so excited for this week's episode. I have none other than my own teacher and mentor and guide, Dr. Nibodhi, joining us. He is a renowned Ayurvedic doctor. He is an educator, has written a number of books, and above all else, he is just an incredible pillar of wisdom. Throughout this episode, we dive into all things self-revolution. We talk about his own journey with his own self-revolution, Vedic philosophy, what it is, and how it can really help you completely change the way that you move through your own life, and how that can help you in the tangible world as well, create more wealth, align with more purpose, have deeper relationships. We also dive into the meaning of yoga and Ayurveda and really this entire system of Vedanta that helps you understand, who you really are and why you're here. And then we end by talking about love and unconditional love and the revolution of love that I know I desire to see, that Nibodhi desires to see, and that I think that in many ways we all desire to see. So enjoy this episode. It's an incredible one. And thank you, as always, for being here with me. Nibodhi, welcome to the Self Revolution podcast. I am so grateful that you're here with me today.
I'm grateful to be here.
This is such a special moment for me because you have been such an incredible part of my journey, and you have been probably one of the most influential people in my life over the past few years. And I am just so excited to bring your wisdom and have this conversation here with you today. So thank you from the depths of my heart. So we met, Nibodhi, very serendipitously out in Maui. I was out there exploring a business venture with a group of men who I didn't know all that well, but I trusted. And we were doing all of this kind of business incubation, entrepreneurship, fun stuff. And every day we would go on these little excursions. And one of these days you came over to go on a hike with us. And I remember you kind of coming to the door, and we start walking, through the, I guess not really woods, jungle of
Yep.
of Maui. And someone told me that you were an Ayurvedic doctor. And I had been starting to really study Ayurveda. I had been going through my own health journey and had been really starting to embody or practice or implement a lot of these Ayurvedic principles into my own life. And I was seeing my health improve. And when I heard you were an Ayurvedic doctor, I think I immediately glommed onto you. And for the rest of the hike was just following you along like a little puppy, asking you all of these questions. And really from that moment on, you become a force in my life. And so I, really want to just open the conversation today, Nibodhi, hearing about you. You have such a fascinating story, and you have been all over the world. And you actually grew up, not too far from here in San Diego, and then started your own journey. So I'll just kick it off to you by asking, what was the first moment that you really started to contemplate or ask yourself this question of, who are you really, and how did you start your own self-revolution?
It's a beautiful question. I was blessed with amazing parents. Not that life wasn't difficult, but I had amazing parents from a very, very early age. They actually taught me and my brother that we weren't the body, that we had bodies, but we're spirit, we're soul, we're consciousness. So that was always in the picture, that understanding. Of course, I didn't know what that meant. I didn't even have a prefrontal cortex. So, it's just but it was part of my upbringing and being connected to the land and to nature, growing up, growing our own food, growing our food in harmony with the seasons and honoring of the four directions like this. But the real exploration started when I was about 15. I was camping one day, really, and had a spontaneous meditation, vision, experience where I wasn't actually in my body anymore. And somehow I got to explore the universe creation. So I had this glimpse of what my parents had been talking about, like I'm a soul, and I have a body, but I'm not the body. So I actually had a tangible experience, not in my body, of creation itself. And what I thought at the time was like Buddha. I thought there was a vision of Buddha. And I went out on this plane and saw what I thought were, in the Tibetan Buddhist tradition, the 10,000 beautiful visions and 10,000 hellish nightmare visions, all simultaneously on the same plane of consciousness. And so that was a long journey. And when I came back to that literally that day changed my life to where I started questioning and exploring consciousness and the direction I was going in. It wasn't a negative direction, but it wasn't what my purpose is. And so literally when I came back from camping, I went back home and told my parents, I'm changing my life, I'm changing the direction. And so that really began the nonstop, moment-to-moment exploration from that point on.
I think it's so beautiful that you were raised in a family that told you that, right? That from a really early age, you were given this gift of maybe questioning, or even if you didn't know what it meant, saying, okay, there's more to life than just this physical existence. But I have to imagine that it hasn't always been easy, that there have been challenges and there have been these times in your life that maybe you have had to kind of break down, or you've been in a situation that has really challenged who you thought you were, these various masks or identities or illusions or Maya. We've all come up on these experiences that have fundamentally changed like who we thought we were, or we've been faced with this reality of like what we thought was real wasn't really real anymore. We've been really judged by a person or by a situation, and that can feel like really jarring.
I mean, for me, it's my whole life is like that. It's still like that. But, I'm so grateful to my parents. And I can say they're never going to watch this. My parents, I've written 7 books. I haven't even read one of them. But that's actually part of it. Like, I'm so grateful to them for raising me the way they did, like completely natural. But there was also a lot of trauma in that, because it was like they raised me and they didn't raise me, because there was so much trauma and neglect. Like, they're just like, you know who you are, and here's how to grow the food, here's the backyard, here's how to take the bus or ride your bike to the beach. Like, I ended up raising myself. Like, my parents weren't there. They're like, with all the wisdom that they gave me, they also gave me the wisdom of I was alone. And so I had to learn to depend on myself. Which is amazing. I became an amazing cook because I had to, right? I had to take care of my little brother. And so I learned how to nurture other people. Like, all the gifts that are blessings came out of these traumas. And, in any situation, we can take our traumas and as either stepping stones and use them for light, or, we can go into deep, dark addictions and things like that. And so I just have the great fortune and grace to have gone towards the light instead of the darkness.
Have there been times where you've maybe gone into the darkness and then pulled your and do you mind maybe share one of those with us? Like, what and how have you navigated getting out of that darkness? Because I think a lot of us can relate to, like, we had something really traumatic happen to us and we feel pulled down and we're trying to get out. How do we do it?
Well, for me, music was a refuge. So like I started playing Like I mean, here's another situation in school. Like I had long hair from the age of 9. And so I was made fun of and teased. But by the time I was 12 years old, like it was the 80s, right? And so rock and roll, Guns N' Roses, Poison, Metallica, all of these like major hair bands. Like I was 12 years old and I was the only long-haired kid in the school. And it was great because the girls totally wanted my attention. Like, but so that's one thing. But music, like I learned to play music. Like I thought I was going to be a musician. I mean, I still play music, but so I created a band and like we actually had a label and like made albums and toured and was like really successful, but it was a death metal band. Like it was dark, very aggressive music. And so I used music as a way of channeling all the angst I had, all the anger, all the pain, all the sorrow. And, the songs were conscious songs. It was about the environment. It was about the government. It was about all the anger I had towards the world, towards my parents, towards the kids in my school, towards whatever I saw as being unjust. So even as we get into Dharma, like there was a sense of Dharma in the music, but that was my escape and my therapy.
Well, and it's beautiful that you found a way to channel that in a way that was constructive in some way. And I think that that's the beauty of a lot of the teachings of Vedic philosophy, which we'll dive into in just a moment, is that there are these channels that we can use to like transmute our pain into our power. And music, it sounds like, was definitely that for you. So a lot of my work and study has been based in Vedic philosophy. And, even when I started studying this, I didn't necessarily have all of the terminology to describe really what it was. And over the years, and particularly over the past few years studying with you, it's really continued to crystallize the vast science of the Vedas and how powerful this philosophy can be to truly transform the world that we live in. And lucky enough, I'm sitting here with you who is a master in this science.
I'm not a master.
You are a master in this science. And so I would really love to dive into this and really talk about, what is this thing? What is Vedic philosophy?
So just the word Veda, it ultimately means wisdom or knowledge. But the Vedic philosophy is essentially the universe. I mean, we could literally have a 10-year conversation on this, or a lifetime conversation, or lifetime conversations. But it's the principle that is the glue of the universe. It's the foundation underlying unity of this world, of the universe, of the creation, and that there's a unified field of consciousness, a divine intelligence, and a divine order behind everything. But that everything is connected, everything is united, everything comes from the same strand of consciousness. And even in quantum physics, like if you do this chaos theory, you look at a fractal and you go down, 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 down. It's all exactly the same. The most nanoparticle is mimicking the whole universe. And so that's within every single person, this universal consciousness, this potential of unlimited creative power and unlimited awarenesses within every person. The fundamentals of the Vedic philosophy is stating that there's a oneness to us, that oneness is love, that oneness is unconditional love, not bound by anything in the material world. And it's a total acceptance. If you believe in God or don't believe in God, if you have religion A, B, C, or D, you believe in God in form, Krishna, Buddha, Allah, Christ, John on the corner of the street, the homeless person down on Venice Boulevard, which is also God. We just don't have the proper vision to see that. Everything is that same unified field, and everyone is free to see that universal consciousness in whatever they want, in whatever way they want to. And then it's also seeing everything as holy, sacred, and divine. Every grain of sand, every drop of water is holy land and is holy water. And every person is holy and every experience is holy. And seeing that unified sacredness and having absolute respect for every person, every living thing, and sharing that beauty and that joy. And ultimately, life is supposed to be a celebration. The Vedic philosophy, especially Sanatana Dharma, which means the eternal path. It's essentially the same thing as the Tao. It says out of nothing came the one, out of one came two, out of two came three, and then the three manifested as all things. But it's the same unified field. So taking every life experience, every interaction we have as that holy divine communion. And so basically, with that understanding, everything we do in life becomes holy. And so maybe we'll talk about it, if you want to talk about it now or later, but there's this principle of the Purusharthas, right? Mm-hmm. So that's the 4 goals of life. So Vedic philosophy, Sanatana Dharma, Vedanta, the ending of Vedas, the ending of knowing means now we're being. We become that. Om Tat Sat, I am that, right? These Vedic dictums. It's totally giving the inclination as to who we really are. But it says that these Purusharthas, the 4 goals of life, it's Dharma, Artha, Kama, and Moksha. Dharma is each person has a very unique purpose, which is why comparison is insane. There's one of you, there's one of me, there's 8 billion of us here on the planet. Everyone made unique with divine intention, with divine will for a purpose. And so we're supposed to find out what our purpose is and manifest that. And then Artha is the wealth. It's like we're here. Mm-hmm. There's material. We have to live in the material plane. We need wealth, and both material wealth and spiritual wealth. And spiritual wealth is knowing who we are, right? But this divine God, goddess, creator doesn't mean for anyone to be poor. Like everyone is supposed to thrive. There's enough in the universe that if we just share it, we're all going to be infinitely abundant. And the next major goal of life is Kama, which is enjoyment. We're here to enjoy sensual pleasure, spiritual pleasure. The highest enjoyment is bliss. And when we know the self, every experience is bliss. So whether you're eating popcorn on the couch or a 5-course meal in a Michelin restaurant, the experience of bliss is not dependent on the external circumstances. It depends on us being aware of our divinity and the divinity in these things. And then the final goal is what's called moksha, which is ultimately self-realization, the understanding of self as part of the whole. And we've transcended the concept or belief that we're separate. We've transcended the limiting beliefs and concepts that anything in this world is separate, and we see everything as a unified field. So those are the 4 goals of life that is the primary foundation of what Vedic wisdom wants to share with us and teach us so we can be successful in all of those.
And what you just shared, Nibodhi, in so many ways is completely revolutionary, because it's not how many of us, particularly in the West, grow up thinking about life. Yeah. I mean, we don't, take a minute to think about what we're eating. Nevertheless, like how should we actually, or how can we approach our life? Yeah. Right? And sometimes it takes us decades upon decades, if ever in our lifetime, for us actually to take a beat and take a pause and ask ourselves, why are we doing the things that we're doing? Why are we living this way? And to me, that's the massive light bulb of Vedic philosophy is like, wait, how are you viewing the world? What do you believe? And are those beliefs serving you? Are they hurting you? And what if this is really true? And as I've started, and been on this journey, and you really sit with it, like you said, quantum physics, all of these other paths, they all really speak to this one truth, which is the truth that you just shared with us. Mm-hmm. So with Vedic philosophy and all of the meaning behind it, how do you think about Vedic philosophy being a path to live life? Like how can someone think about this as, like, how do you think about actually implementing Vedic philosophy in your day-to-day life?
Well, for myself, at this point, I don't even think about it. It's just part and parcel, right? But if someone's beginning on the journey, get a book, listen to your podcast, finding out what those principles are. Like the first question ultimately would be, who am I and why am I here? Someone has to have that interest to even ask this question, right? I imagine that your listeners, if they're listening to your podcast, they already have that interest. But, the first question is, who am I? Why am I here? Am I living to my fullest? Am I happy? Like, very basic question. Am I happy? Like, our society, like you were talking a little bit earlier, like even with the Vedic path, the wisdom, there's not a support system for that, right? The Native Americans, the First Nations, that's the support system. It's the exact same thing. The Native American wisdom, South American wisdom, all indigenous wisdom is Vedic philosophy. We're just calling it Vedic philosophy because it's the oldest written down system there is. But all the indigenous tribes, all the wise elders in these tribes all over the planet had the exact same realization. So whatever the path is, someone needs to want to seek out a change. Mm-hmm. And it comes from disillusion. It usually comes from pain. It comes from major disappointment, sorrow, grief, heartache. It's rare that someone just out of nowhere says, oh, I'm going to go searching for God in myself. Yeah. Usually it's because life is not working out well and shit got really hard. There's got to be something more. There's got to be a solution. There's got to be an ending to this pain. Mm-hmm. And that's even what Buddha taught, right? The Four Noble Truths. There's suffering. Suffering exists. That's an absolute truth. There's a cause to that suffering, and ultimately the greatest cause of suffering is separation from self. Mm-hmm. We don't know who we are. We got to disconnect, and that usually happens in the first 7 years with some kind of trauma. And then there's a means to the end of that suffering. Mm-hmm. And cessation, the means to that suffering is self-inquiry. Mm-hmm. Who am I? And then we start the path. And so if someone wants, to ask that question, there's infinite books, there's teachers, there's podcasts, there's ultimately, I wish our yoga classes were actually teaching them. Most yoga classes are exercise, but there's some,
Mm-hmm.
So there's infinite places to look. Maybe even, we were talking earlier, Chat GPT, you could ask.
Totally.
I'm not really sure how that works. I haven't explored it, but we have all this modern technology and that's not going away, so.
Yes, absolutely. So let's take a step back and just talk about where does Vedic philosophy come from?
Well, it comes from the universe or ultimately, but the origins of it are India. About 10,000, 20,000 years ago, there were a few people, a very minute few people who decided to go on that journey. They also were not totally stoked with how their lives were going, and they decided to go within and ask the question. And they were so committed to that, they sat down and asked. And what did Christ say? Ask and ye shall receive. Now we have to be patient because the universe doesn't believe in time, right? So there's no time for the universe. We have a time-space continuum understanding, but the universe doesn't. So they sat down and were willing to sit there and wait until they got the answer. And they followed the breath up the spine and down the spine and into the belly and out of the belly and waited patiently. And they watched the stars and they watched the grass grow and they watched the leaves on the tree die and decay and regenerate. And they just watched and observed the universe. And they watched and observed themselves and they watched and observed the mind. Mm. They didn't say the mind was a horrible thing, a terrible thing. The body was a horrible, terrible thing. They didn't have any judgments about it. They just sat and watched. They were scientists. They were the greatest scientists. They're just like, let's see what's there. Let's do clinical observation on ourselves. And so they did the greatest deep dive into consciousness ever. And they got the answer. And by divine grace, they wrote it down for us. And, there's a few who have passed it on through the thousands of years. And so that's, but it originated in India. And even, Sanskrit, it's the oldest written language. All of that originated in India. So.
Well, and you said, Vedic philosophy really came from this deep observation. And that's what I found in my journey as well, is that it's not about taking any of this word or reading a book and believing what it says. It's about the embodied experience, about asking yourself those questions. Who am I? Why am I here? And listening and observing and seeing what you hear. And what do you observe? And when you observe yourself, what do you start to see? And what patterns do you start to see? And that's been what's been so beautiful for me is in many ways in my journey, I was doing that before I had the language. And so once I found some of the language in these Vedic teachings, it was such an aha moment that, oh, wow, there are these universal truths that we can live by. And the more I study them, the more it's just like, of course, this is the way the world works. How could the world be any other way? Yet most of us are living completely out of harmony with that. And so I think that in many ways is this massive opportunity that we have. So you mentioned yoga, and you are an Ayurvedic doctor. So what are these things? Like, what is yoga? What is Ayurveda? And how do these things relate to Vedic philosophy?
Yeah, so just the terminology, yoga literally means union, to yoke, to unify together. And Ayurveda means the wisdom of life, the knowledge of life. In modern day, yoga is really more associated with the hatha yoga, which is the actual physical practice of the asana, but that's actually a very small part of yoga. Yoga originated from Patanjali. There's actually, in Vedic philosophy, there's what's called Shad Darshan, as these six tangible ways of understanding and coming to the truth about who we are. So yoga and Ayurveda and Vedanta, those are parts of it. So yoga philosophy is these 8 limbs where asana actually just means seat. It means sitting there. And even in these Patanjali Yoga Sutras, they only talk about 3 asanas. They don't talk about all that movement. The hatha yoga part came much later, but the yoga philosophy, it's these 8 limbs of yoga that systematically lead us to understanding the nature of the self. And it's a step-by-step progress. Nowadays, everyone, there's Kundalini yoga. Everyone wants to raise their Kundalini, which can actually be dangerous. If you just start doing these intense practices to raise the Kundalini and have some experience, it's not even about having experience. It's about stopping experience and just witnessing and being. In being, the whole universe is experience, but we want this small experience. My pineal gland opened and there was light and rainbow sparkles and unicorns and some mystical world opened up. And that happens too, but that's not really the goal, right? The goal's right here. So these 8 limbs, which anyone can go and study, are a guideway as a guidepost or GPS to the self. I mean, that's really what all the Vedas are. It's a GPS. We know the destination, and you want to get to that goal, pick a route, but all paths lead back to the ocean. And so yoga can, do that, and asana is part of that. So it would be amazing. And there's got to be, I haven't been to a yoga class in 20 years. I mean, I've taught yoga classes, but I haven't been to a yoga class in 20 years. So I don't know what people are teaching, but there's got to be people who are actually teaching the true fundamental heart of yoga, which is understanding the self and understanding the self as love, right? With Ayurveda, most people think of Ayurveda as Ayurvedic medicine or the Ayurvedic diet. There's not an Ayurvedic diet. There's 8 billion people. There's Ayurveda. It's individualized. It's how each person is so unique, and it's a guideline for how to live in the material world and have a spiritual life. But the internal medicine part, the Ayurvedic medicine, that's 1 limb. There's also Ashtanga, 8 limbs of Ayurveda, where Kaya Chikista is the internal medicine part, is just 1 part of it. And the rest of it is about the spiritual practice. So there's an aphorism in Ayurveda that states Ayurveda, the medicine part of it, will lead a person to health and vitality in themselves, so that person will eventually want to know the essence of themselves and lead to a spiritual awakening. And so those are 2 of the parts of the Vedas that are, becoming more mainstream. Yeah.
And I really resonate with that, because I think that most people nowadays have heard the word yoga, even though if they don't necessarily know the full depth of it. And then Ayurveda, I think, is still it's coming. It's coming along.
I mean,
more
you
and
can
more
get,
people.
there's Ayurveda in Whole Foods,
There's
right?
Ayurveda in Whole Foods, but I still think it's not as mainstream.
Yeah.
And then I think the word Vedas and like Vedic philosophy is very much still not out there. And so I think it's really helpful to tie all those things in and understand what the ultimate goal of it all is really. So I often talk about how, yoga has helped me, yoga and Ayurveda, all of this philosophy has helped me be a better human being. Like in every single facet of my life. It has helped me make more money.
Yeah.
Because I've aligned with my dharma and my purpose in life. It has helped me be better in my relationships. It has helped me become a healthier, more vital, just human being. I have so much more energy. And so there's all of these much more tangible benefits to actually starting to align your life in that way. So can you speak to that? Because I think often people think about yoga or Ayurveda in these like ethereal things. It's like, yeah, okay, it's great to be spiritual and woo-woo and all and be one with nature. But I'm worried about paying my bills, or I'm worried about finding a relationship. So how are those two things interconnected?
Well, from the true essence of yoga and Ayurveda and from Vedic philosophy, the purpose of those is to be successful in all of those areas, be successful in whatever you're doing, whether you're a yoga teacher or a dance teacher or a banker or a businessman or mining crypto or the street sweeper, the cashier. Those principles that these paths demonstrate want you to be the very best at it you can be. And like I was saying earlier, like artha, wealth, is one of the Vedic goals of life, to be completely successful. And what we do and how we earn our wealth ideally is aligned. If you're supposed to be a Vedic teacher, you're supposed to be a yoga teacher, and you have to go work at 7-Eleven to pay the bills, there's something out of alignment there. So the path of yoga, of Ayurveda, gives us the strength physically, mentally, emotionally, and spiritually to be successful in whatever we're doing. So again, the universe doesn't want us poor. It wants us more abundant than we could ever imagine. There's in the Vedic tradition, in the Hindu tradition, there's 3 gods and goddesses. Like there's the creator, which is Brahma or his wife Saraswati. So God and goddess have to unify, right? And then there's the sustainer, which is Vishnu and all his incarnations, and the goddess Lakshmi. They preserve and sustain the universe. In this material world, what preserves and sustains our home, our bodies, we need wealth to do that. We need food to do that. We need clothing in the right climate to do that. So ultimately, the Vedas wish for us the greatest in everything. And then ultimately, Shiva and his consort Kali, the divine mother, the ruler over time, transform everything. They're not the destroyers, they're the transformers, because it's the same thing. Like, we're so afraid of death. It's bizarre because people travel. I lived in Colorado and New Mexico for a long time going to Ayurveda school, and people travel from all over the world to come photograph the aspens in the fall. They're worshiping death. They're worshiping the god and goddess of death every fall. The East Coast too. The trees are amazing. I don't know, out here, not so much. But we're worshiping death, but it's not death. It's death, rebirth, transformation. Everything is just transforming. So that's part of the Vedic philosophy too, is having a complete understanding of birth, death, and everything in between, and the perfection of that, and the beauty of that, and worshiping and celebrating every step of the way. All of the success and all of the failures, right? And then ultimately, whatever we're doing in the material world, whether you're a banker, you're a lawyer, you're the guy on the street, there's a knowledge of self in that and what the purpose is. And so there should be really, it's not woo-woo. It's not this far out new age thing. If you see someone walking around professing that they're spiritual and they're smiling and spaced out and like this all the time, nothing but love and rainbows, they're not living here in the material world, and they're not really following the Vedic path. Okay? That's not true spirituality. There's some bypass going on. There's something being masked. We're here to feel everything. Okay? I have so much love and so much gratitude and so much joy in myself. And I also feel the depth of the pain of the earth. And walking down on Venice Beach yesterday, and I actually stopped, and me and my wife talked to this man who's living on the street we didn't have any money with us. We literally went out there with nothing, and so we couldn't give him anything, but we sat and talked to him and listened to his story. And so that's what we can give if we have nothing to give. Listen to someone's story, give them our consciousness. But this Vedic path, it's about success in every level.
And that is just, to me, the massive opportunity that we have. What would our world look like if we all started walking a path like this?
Yeah.
If we all started really seeing the oneness of creation, if we started seeing each other, ourselves and each other, and if we started really creating our life from this place of consciousness and awareness. And so thank you for sharing all of that, Nibodhi. It's really, I think, inspiring and empowering. And it shows how by starting to reorganize around this concept of self-awareness, around these universal truths, you are able to really create a material life in a way that I think is what most people ultimately desire, is love and fulfillment and, peace and joy, but also being able to weather the storms of pain and destruction and the natural cycles of death and rebirth. And I have certainly felt that in my own experience of, dealing with death and having my grandfather die, but still seeing joys in that and all of those aspects there. So you ended talking that little section of talking about this story of you the other day being on Venice Boulevard and sitting down with someone who's homeless and asking them their story. And my eyes are getting teary just hearing that from you, because how powerful. And again, you exemplify what it means to serve. You've served me, but you really do serve, everyone who comes into your life. And you serve from a place of unconditional love. So what does it really mean to serve from a place of unconditional love? What does it mean to serve others?
Ultimately, in true service, there is no other. You really see yourself in everyone else. That's what yoga is. It's that union. So when we're serving others, we're actually serving ourselves. What we do to another person, we're doing to ourselves, right? And so you see yourself in humanity, you see humanity in yourself and in the earth and the trees. Even walking by, as a kid, mindlessly, we pluck leaves off a tree, we, break branches, whatever. Now I can't do that anymore. It's just, the tree is an extension of your own limb. It's using only what's needed, right? So service, it's when your heart is open and when you're seeing that as reality, when love becomes your reality, when union becomes your reality, there's nothing left to do but serve. What else can you do? If your brother's on the street or someone calls you and says, I need help, your heart melts, right? So I don't know about unconditional love as far as myself goes. That's a massive, massive word that I don't take lightly. To me, if you find someone who can unconditionally love you, you won the universal lottery beyond compare. Unconditional love means if you come here and kill me, that's kind of your karmic predicament. Still love you. It's just my body. If you take my money, if you cancel culture me, whatever, that's your problem. I'm still going to love you. Because it's a fundamental understanding that, if we sit with any person, that's why we sat and talked to this brother. I believe fully, if you sit with any person for 2 to 4 hours and look them in the eye and hear their story, no matter how much bad things they've done in this world, you're going to fall in love with them. One of my teachers, Gabor Mate, made a documentary called The Wisdom of Trauma. And they go into the prisons and talk about, these, some are murderers, some are rapists, some are just like, hardened criminals. Some are just thieves who, stole to survive, or drug dealers, whatever. Every single one of them, they're in a circle, and every single one of them, they're asking about their traumas, their upbringing, horrific traumas. It makes perfect sense. If someone is doing an action that is not loving and kind, it's because they weren't giving love and kindness. So if we want to live in a world that's filled with love and kindness, we have to give love and kindness. It was Gandhi, he said, be the change you want to see in the world. It's not just a philosophy, that's karma yoga, that's truth in action, that's love in action. But to really get to that place of unconditional love where, that's part of, that's the, we're not caring what someone else thinks of us. It's radical, but if you don't like me, that's not my problem. And most of the time I don't even care what I think. Why am I going to care what someone else thinks? But truly, unconditional love, it's the highest state of consciousness, and it's rare. I don't think I'm there. I know I'm not there. I have limitations in my consciousness that I still work on. I'm not perfected by any means. I still have lower base limiting desires that sometimes prevent me from giving to the fullest extent. I'm aware of them though. That's the difference. That's what yoga has done for me. It makes me aware of them. So they're not hiding anymore. The shadow is completely present. And so many are shadow work, whatever. Shadow play, dance with the shadow. Stop hiding it. A few years ago, before Ram Dass died, I was at a satsang with him. And someone asked him a question. They said, Ram Dass, you meditated for so many years, 6 decades. You've taken so much LSD, so much psychedelics. You've hung out with Neem Karoli Baba, your guru, Anandamayi Ma, Amma, all these saints. You've done this fast, that fast, all these things. How long did it take you for the Vasanas, which are considered the latent tendencies? Some yogic teachings call them negative tendencies, but they're not negative. There's a teaching there. They're just latent tendencies. How long did it take you for the Vasanas to go away? And he laughed. And he said, I have no idea what you're talking about. Every single one of them is still there. Not one has gone away. And there's what are you talking about? He's like, we never see you engage. He's like, yeah, I have caller ID on the screen of my consciousness. And so when they call and say, I'm coming over for tea, I say, no, I just don't pick up the phone, and I lock the door. And so they don't come in. And so that's what yoga has, one of the things that yoga has done for me. It's giving me the awareness that when these shadow sides come up, when these less than divine tendencies come up, I'm just aware of them, and I can consciously choose whether I engage with them or not.
That's the embodiment.
Yeah.
I think that's the embodiment, and it also makes it real, and it makes it human, and it's not a destination that we are seeking, but it's a journey. And what a better way to live life, right? To be able to have that awareness, and then to be able to, like you said, I love that analogy of seeing the caller ID and choosing not to pick up and saying, no, I don't want to take that path, or I'm not going to follow that thought, and I'm not going to believe everything that comes into my awareness, or I'm not going to engage in every battle or negative thing that's said about me. I'm not going to be affected by that. And to be able to have that space and to choose a different path, what a beautiful, beautiful way to live.
Yeah. And also not judging myself for it.
Totally.
Because a lot of, even in yoga, even in Ayurveda, there's so much judgment around that this is a good thought, this is a bad thought, this is a good action, this is a bad action. Who said so?
Totally.
There's gunas, there's qualities in nature. It's a different quality. That's all. And so I think really one of the most important things is finding teachers and that are going to support you being completely human without the judgment that you're good, bad, right, or wrong for having that thought, that feeling, that emotion. Because there's a lot of that. That's what religion's for, to tell us how bad we are and how hot we're going to get if we don't do what they say. Right?
I mean, and I think that I share my feeling of being met with unconditional love from you because I feel that space with you.
You're easy to love.
But I do. I mean, I think I have come to you over the years with some things that I have felt that way, where I have judged myself. And you have always been that force of wrapping me in that love and telling me that it's okay to feel that way. And helping me see, my own power in that and belief in myself, even when I've questioned it. So I think, in the workplace, love is not often something that is always present. And love in general, I think in our society is something that we often guard, right? We guard love. We don't often say, I love you freely. There's like a sentiment of, you can only tell your partner, that you love them or your family. But that'd be weird if you just walked up to a friend or a stranger and said, I love you. But when you really start questioning that, you say, well, why is that the case? Why do we guard love, or why is that the case? And what would the world be like if we gave love more freely? So talk to me about that. How do we start to infuse more love into our society? How do we overcome the stereotypes of some ways of, why is it the way that it is?
Well, I mean, it does go, I think it's conditioning. You're talking in the beginning about conditions. It's a conditioning, especially in the workplace, right? So, we have this insane concept, survival of the fittest.
Yeah.
What if we change it to survival of the kindest, the survival of the compassionist? The most compassion. Like Ram Dass, he coined the term in the 80s. He's like, I'm a closet compassioner, because it wasn't in vogue. It wasn't styled to be in compassion, right? So it requires a complete mindset change.
Totally.
But we can't, the concept of think globally, act locally, this is about as local as we can get. So we have control over ourselves. So we make a decision every day. I'm going to wake up and be as filled with love and as filled with consciousness as possible in every interaction. And we may be successful, we may not, but we have to try to do that. In the workplace, imagine that. Imagine a workplace where everyone knew each other's family and everyone cared about each other's well-being, and everyone's heart and consciousness was the most important thing. I fully believe, and I've seen it in the service projects that I've done in India, like massive service projects with the tsunami, with earthquakes, with floods, during the pandemic. When people work together, miracles happen. They should be happening every day, but miracles can happen. So if we can incorporate that in the workplace, where each other is the most important thing, the productivity is going to be so much greater. It's going to happen at a quicker pace with greater success. People are going to love being at work versus dreading it. There's going to be less sick days because people aren't in trauma and stress mode and are, dreading Monday and celebrating Friday. And then as soon as Friday comes, out comes the whiskey bottle, right? Or whatever the thing is that numbs the pain of the week. it can happen. I mean, there's got to be corporations and businesses out there already doing that. I mean, even like, I'm not super connected, but I have some friends who work in Google, and it's a pretty conscious place to work. Like the entire cafeteria, from my understanding, is all organic, and they have acupuncture there and massage and yoga and gyms, like state-of-the-art gyms, and like their health and well-being is highly valued. Mm-hmm. I don't know about the other inner workings of it and the corporate part of it, but the employees on a day-to-day basis are well cared for, right? And so that's a pretty massive corporation on planet Earth. So if they're doing it, and I know there's a few others, but it's someone has to start and set an example, one person at a time. It's like a domino effect, right? Mm-hmm. And take one company, you start a company and infiltrate those principles of kindness, caring, and sharing into that company, and they're successful. Other companies are going to come and say, hey, I want that too. Our employees are never sick. The health insurance bill is nothing. This is amazing, right? We just save so much money on health insurance, and no one's having sick days, and we're producing 25, 50% more.
That's what we're going to do.
Yeah.
That's the
Go
future
team.
of what we're creating. Yeah. Absolutely. And I'll just double click on that I remember, in my personal business, I'll often sign my emails, with love. And I definitely, I say I love you to a lot of people now. And I remember when I started doing that was, such a shift. But even in the corporate world, I had started sending that, with love.
Beautiful.
Some emails, and it was so jarring at first. I remember the first time I sent it, it was accidental. Because it's always so formal, thank you, or whatever. Best Bree. And it completely shifts the narrative, and you start leading with your heart, and you start really seeing people, and you start sitting down with them and feeling them. And it completely shifts the way that they interact with you. Yeah. So you have, shared this wisdom of entering the heart of the people that you serve and your clients. And you see, I don't even know how many clients do you now have, Nibodhi? Thousands, right? Who knows? Yeah. And you've been doing this for decades. And I remember, in one of our sessions together, you just, were talking about this concept of you can't change someone, or you can't really even be a guide to share wisdom with someone unless you're really like entering the heart of who they are. Mm-hmm. How do you enter the heart of another human being?
You do this. You sit with someone, you look in their eyes and listen to their story. People want to be heard. Mm-hmm. I had a friend once who started a project, and they didn't get the funding to finish it, but their project was, they were in Boulder, and there's a huge houseless population all over the planet, but they were going around to the homeless and sitting with them and getting their stories, recording audio and writing their stories down. And they wanted to produce a book and about the homeless people's stories and like their journey, and produce it and take all the money to build shelters and like get them real health care and get them like real good quality food. They didn't get the funding they needed to do it, so it never happened. But imagine doing that. Like every city in America, we go around and collect the stories and put those on Netflix instead of like, I don't know. I don't even know what's on TV because I don't ever watch TV, but someone was telling me that they spend their nights watching some like Housewives of Tampa or something. I'm not sure where, but some housewives story. But, imagine we're having the homeless tell their stories, a whole Netflix documentary on that. People are going to fall in love with them. They're not going to be houseless anymore. Someone's going to want to take them in. We can build shelters all over the country where they can grow food, build farms, build little community gardens for the homeless to get organic food, grow some herbs. Yeah. I know some of them can't go to shelters. Like I've worked in a homeless shelter in Boulder, and some of the requirements are that they have to be sober And some of these the traumas are so deep, they can't be sober unless they're getting clinical help. And some of them they're not even capable of it. But that's a few percent. Most of them want help. Most of them want to be heard. Most of them want to be loved. Anyone, whether it's Donald Trump or Chris down on the Venice Boulevard or anyone. Everyone wants to be heard. Everyone wants to feel connected. That's what everyone wants, connectivity. Number one, connection to others. Number two, connection to ourself. It should be number one, connection to self. Number two, connection to others as self. But we just want to feel connection. And that's the whole thing. Everyone wants to feel love on some level, whether it's personal or transpersonal.
Mm-hmm. Right? And that's what we're seeing, I think, today is this massive disconnection crisis. Yep. And the antidote to that is presence and love and looking into each other's eyes and seeing each other and feeling each other and feeling heard and feeling seen and creating community around that. And that is certainly, I think, what, I'm doing and trying to do and you're embodying as well. And I think the more of us that we can all do that, I mean, it's life-changing.
And that's where, just quick interjection, where wealth is really important because we can't build those shelters and those programs without a lot of money. So,
and I mean, to just keep going down that path around that, it is, well, I guess I'll back up a second and say, one, that when you start to really enter the heart of someone, when you start to really be in this massive presence with someone, it allows you to have a relationship with them that is completely different than what it was before. So if you're thinking about tangible things like sales or any sort of relationship, right? Yeah. And pretty much a lot of businesses out there today are in the relationship business. Mm-hmm. They're in the connection business. Yeah. And this is the way to do it. Right. And there's such a massive opportunity that's often being missed because of that lack of connection. Mm-hmm. And even if you're not directly in that maybe outward facing role of sales, even internally with the employee connectivity, when you don't feel seen or heard as an employee, are you motivated to work? Yeah. No. Right. Yeah. And so I just love this being a vision for society in many ways of how can we all start entering the hearts of one another? How can we lead from that place? How can we change that mentality of sales to service? And when you start serving others and leading from that way, there's no way that you don't grow your business. There's not a way that you don't continue to create more wealth for yourself and for the world because you are serving from such a deep place that it's not selfish, it's selfless.
During the pandemic, a friend of mine, Mark, he wrote a song, and the chorus goes, "We all do well when we all do well." Mm-hmm.
That's revolutionary wealth. That's the opportunity that we have to completely transform the relationships that we have as a society with money, and more of that.
I mean, even on, I don't know the other countries, but in the American bills, it says, "In God we trust," right? So if we actually trust in God, we're more than happy to share that with everyone.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So Nibodhi, you really are this epitome of a true guide. I think a leader, and a very different type of leader than I think that we often see in society. And particularly for me, it's been interesting. I've had a lot of male mentors and people in my life, but a lot of the ones that I've deeply trusted are women. And our relationship's been very special to me in that way because it is completely genderless. I don't see you as this male figure in my life. I see you just as a pillar of love and someone who can guide me and support me and be there for me and help me become more me. And so when you think about leading, when you think about guiding others, when you think about creating transformation, What does that look like? Like, how do you become a leader?
Honestly, I have no idea. All I know is I can do myself and what my heart tells me, and that's live and love every moment and live from that space of love. Whether that looks like leadership or a guide or whatever, that's for someone else to decide. I'm just there to show up and be present and support in whatever way I can support. It's not an intentional thought. I'm going to be a leader or a guide or a teacher or anything like that. It's just a natural flow of consciousness. And so that relationship is different with each person, right? I've written books, and those are guides. They're pointers, but the wisdom isn't mine. Like, I don't have something unique that I created out of myself. It's the wisdom of the ancients. It's the wisdom of the universe. It's the wisdom of Mother Earth. So I'm just sharing it. You know, it's kind of like I try, literally one of my meditations every morning is, or my prayers, to become like hollow bamboo. And that consciousness, great spirit, the divine mother, flows through me and makes a beautiful song every day. But I'm not trying to be anything other than here, right? So, but if someone's, if someone's needs to be the leader of a company or a team or something like that, all I can say is live from love and do it from love and do it from a conscious place of dharma, of what our heart feels is right. And everyone knows the difference between what's right and what's not right. If it's loving, if it's kind, if it's uplifting, if it's supporting the whole, that's right. If it's selfish, if it's what can I get out of it, what's in it for me, that's not supporting the whole. That's not seeing a unified consciousness. That's not seeing ourselves in each other. So lead from love. Like, that's all I can say.
I've taken that, meditation from you, and definitely I do the same thing, every morning. And it's such a different way to live your life, because you're taking yourself out of it in so many ways. It's not about you. The pressure is not on you completely. Again, it's a reframe of how you live your life, and the concept of leading from a place of love. Again, I think it's revolutionary, because it's just not how our society in many ways is led today. It's not the example of what we often see as leadership, particularly male leadership. And it's so beautiful to just be a witness to seeing how transformative that can be. And I've seen that, in my own life as well, of how magnetic that can be. Mm-hmm. So on the hollow log, I think we share some of these tendencies. I love to create. Right? Like, I love to make things happen. I love to do. Yeah. And in earlier years, it was almost a necessant doing. Yeah. Like, just continuously, like, I must get more done and put more on my plate. And it can almost take over your life. And in some ways, I didn't realize that I was escaping myself because I was trying to do so much. I was almost masking pain that I was feeling, right? And you have taught me this concept of being, and being able to fully be with myself, to accept myself, to love myself. So how do we start to shift from a place of doing to being? And as you say, through being, doing.
Yeah. A huge part of my journey in shifting was, at some point I was doing so much, and it was all good things, right? It was all in service. But it was 18, 20 hours a day. And I wasn't happy anymore. There wasn't a joy in it. If I was walking through the ashram I live in sometimes, or walking through a hall in one of the programs from Traveling the World, and someone stopped just to say hi, I wouldn't smile at them. I would sometimes even snap at them, it became unbearable to do because I wasn't living in love. I wasn't living in a state of self-regulation and being. So it came through exhaustion and years of doing and not being. And so the greatest way to learn how to do something is by screwing it up royally and having epic failures. Literally my greatest successes came from epic failures because I learned exactly what not to do, right? How I don't want to be and what doesn't work for me. And so I think, that's the other thing is we need to give ourselves permission to fail. In this society, in this culture, you have to be perfect all the time or they're going to cancel you. You say one wrong thing on your social media network and you got an onslaught of, people ready to murder you and crucify you. So, having the courage to fail, having the courage to screw up, and then having the courage to say, oh, I totally screwed up. That doesn't work. Edison, I love Thomas Edison. This story about Edison and the light bulb, I believe it was like 2001 experiments it took before he got the filament right to harness the light bulb. And they interviewed him and they said, how did you have the strength to keep going when you failed 2001 times? And he says, I don't even know what you're talking about. I didn't fail 2001 times. I learned 2001 things that don't harness light. It was a 2002 step experiment, right? And so we should really embrace our failures in getting to the state of being and accept those as going to the gym. You want bigger muscles, you go to the gym. It's painful.
Yep.
You may, get injuries along the way, but they're valuable. You learn how not to lift the weight so you can lift the weight properly. So getting to being it's a journey, and there's not a specific route that everyone can follow. There's not a guidebook. This is how you be. Everyone has to figure it out. Mm-hmm. But it's being committed to that. Mm-hmm. Now, one of the greatest things is meditation, just sitting down. There's a saying, don't just sit there, do something. No. Don't just do something, sit there. Sit there 5 minutes a day. Anyone can do this. Sit there 5 minutes a day and just watch. Meditation isn't, there's all these meditation techniques, but meditation isn't the technique. It's what happens at the end of the technique when everything is still. It's a natural state. Modern science calls it flow state, right? You're riding an epic wave, double overhead wave, and there's no more you, there's no more wave, there's no more seashore. There's just this flow of energy together. And so that's being. And it happens spontaneously. There's nothing we can do to get to be other than stopping.
Samadhi, the oneness, the state of oneness. Yeah. And it is. And I think when you dive into the 8 limbs of yoga and just the meditation as a whole, and I think that's a whole nother topic, maybe for another day of what that really is. But it is this state of just being in oneness and unobstructed awareness and being able to receive, and so much less about doing and needing to meditate, and so much more about being and being that receptacle of creation and of the universe.
It takes practice.
It does. Lots of practice. It's taken me a lot of practice to be comfortable with silence and stillness and quiet, and to honor the beauty of that, and also to realize how much more effective I am. I am so much more effective. My morning practice is now generally at least an hour, and that seems like so much time to some people, but I'm like, if I spend an hour doing that, I'm going to be able to do 4 times the amount of work during the day than if I didn't do that. And I think that, again, if we start to reorient the way that we think about these things as a society, we're going to be able to create so much more. And it all starts on that individual level.
Commitment to self.
Commitment to self. Commitment to the journey. So Nibodhi, what is the goal of life?
What is my goal of life? The goal of life.
The goal of life.
According to the Vedas, to know the self. To me, what is the self? Love. To be love in every moment. To me, that's literally like why the universe was created. So that supreme conscious intelligence, it wanted to experience itself as love. So from that absolute unmanifest state, Sanskrit and the Vedas call it avyakta, unmanifest, consciousness said, let's play, let's dance, let's experience love. So consciousness manifested as this dual state of Shiva and Shakti, Purusha, Prakriti, the divine masculine, the divine feminine principles, yin, yang, whatever you want to call it, for the sake of creating, and created all things in beauty, in wonder, to experience itself as love. Life was not designed to be a trauma, a drama, a horror movie, a tragedy. It's supposed to be a comedy, a musical, a dance party, and a love story. And all good love stories end in the merging of that divine couple again back into each other. And everyone cries and everyone rejoices and everyone celebrates, and it's the best movie you saw. And so the goal of life is to love and to live in love. We don't, some of these paths, I'm not even sure if they're paths, but some of these religions, whatever, you're living your life for the hope of some heavenly existence afterwards in some realm, maybe with some clouds and a guy in a white beard, or from some other traditions, you get like 10,000 virgins or whatever the crazy stories are. It's here and now. That's fantasy. It's here and now. What happened? Like, I believe it's Kabir. It's either Kabir. It's Kabir. He said there's a poem he sang or wrote about an empty apartment in the city of death. Seek for the beloved while you are here. Jump into experience while you are here. Find the divine sound while you are here. What you find now, you will find then. If you find nothing now, you will simply end up with an empty apartment in the city of death. If you merge with the ecstatic now, you will end this world with satisfied desire and a smile and love. So it's God is now, heaven is now. This world is heaven or hell. We make it what we want. It's not a location. It's an understanding of self. So the goal of life is to love. And the self is love. We came from the desire of self to love. So self and love are interchangeable. But again, that's unconditional love, where there's no conditions required. We don't need fancy houses. But if you have a fancy house, enjoy it. Like if you have the blessing to have a fancy house, enjoy it. If you've got like 30 rooms and there's 2 people, maybe invite some people off of Venice Beach to stay in your house for a little while and do some gardening or something. But nonetheless, enjoy the material world to the fullest extent with the deepest gratitude. But love, 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 love. That's it. That's the whole game, is to get back to love. We're never separate from love. We just have, really the whole world, it's like sitting in a room and the sun's shining outside and we have the blinds closed and say that there's no light. Open the blinds. That's it. Now there's light. So the love is always there. That's innate in every being of creation. We just have blinds over our eyes and our heart.
It's the Maya, it's the illusion, kind of going back to where we started and the journey of self-revolution. And how do you start to open the blinds and to wipe off the window and to see yourself as what it truly is, which is love and unconditional love, and to see that in the heart of not just yourself, but of every living thing in creation. And what happens when you start to live your life from that place is pretty, it's hard to describe, because it's a different state of existence. It's a completely different way of viewing the world, of interacting with one another. And it's certainly the world that I choose to live in. I know you choose to live in, and the world that I think we both desire to create and to see more of. So Nibodhi, thank you for being here with me today. This has been such an inspiring conversation. And, every single time that I am around you, it just continues to elevate me. And I am so grateful for that. And I hope that this conversation today elevates everyone who listens to it and helps them see who they innately are and opens their eyes to new ways of being and thinking and creating, and to see that there are leaders like yourself. There are different ways of moving through the world that are completely driven by love and service and selflessness. And that even with all of that, we're still human beings and we fuck up and we make mistakes and we fail and it's hard and it's not all, sunshines, rainbows, and roses. It can be deep and dark, but that we are choosing, and that there is the opportunity to choose a new path and another path and a loving path. And thank you so much, Nibodhi. For those who would love to connect with you, to learn more about you, your work, where can they find you?
So on Instagram at dr.nibodhi, dr.nibodhi. And I don't know when you'll be releasing this, but I will have a podcast either out already or very soon being released called the Health and Consciousness Podcast. So that should be on all major platforms.
Amazing. Well, I can't recommend you enough for all things from Ayurvedic consultations to just your wisdom. And I am so excited to continue to be a part of your journey. I'm so grateful for the just wisdom that you've given me and my journey, and you are continuing to shape, how I move through the world and how this podcast evolves. You've been involved in the creation of all of that. So all of the links for how to reach you will also be in the show notes for today. So I'll just close today by, once again, saying thank you, really seeing you. And I know when I look into your eyes, I really do see the multiplicity of nature, but the unity that really comes, the harmony amongst the diversity. Thank you for being a pillar of love and light in my life. I'm so grateful for you. Namaste.